Hungry Nights in Pattaya, Episode 1, The Queue by the Roadside. Ning eased her Yamaha against the curb, lining it neatly with 3 other bikes. If her day had refused order, at least the parking could pretend to it. The mirrors wore a faint crust of salt from the sea breeze. The metal felt damp beneath her fingers. She swung her leg over, slid off the seat, and joined the small queue that trailed from the battered cart with its glowing bulbs and handwritten sign. Somtam balaa, extra chilli, crab if you dare. Second road hummed like a beehive. Headlights drifted past in slow, constant lines. Somewhere behind the trees, a bar sang along to an English chorus everyone half knew. A tuk-tuk rattled by. A taxi idled with its bass thudding gently through the panels. Above it all came the sound that always centered her, the steady, unhurried clack of pestle on mortar, papaya threads sighing against clay, the little gasp of lime as it broke, a whisper of fish sauce rising with the steam. She breathed it in, hungry enough to taste air, crushed garlic, roasted chili, fermented depth that pinched the back of the nose, yet made the mouth water. She had eaten nothing since noon, unless you counted the syrupy drinks the men had bought her at the club. Her body wanted salt and heat. It wanted the slap and sparkle of somtam balaa. It wanted something true. 4 in the morning was not late for Pattaya. It was late for Ning. On most nights, she left the gentleman's club before midnight. She walked into fresher air, checked her messages, and rode home along quieter streets. Tonight, the Farang boss had asked the remaining hostesses to stay. A group of high-spending tourists had decided time was optional. They had been merry. Then they had been loud. They had patted the cushions. They had laughed too close to faces. They had waved their cards like flags of their own importance. Ning had smiled. She had kept her tone light. She had managed her way through 3 hours of insistence that thought itself charming. When they finally left, she felt as if her ribs had been used as a drum. She checked her purse. 230 baht. Somtam balaa would chip at that. Less than 200 would remain to feed 3 people who were waiting for her. The arithmetic hung in the air. Pattaya did not blink. The vendor's helper, a boy with a gap where a tooth should have been, gave her a look of recognition and cheek. Somtam pie? Pet mac? Very spicy, she said, holding 2 fingers casually. Not a dare, just a request for honesty. The old Eisen woman behind the mortar nodded without looking up. She added papaya, a handful of tomatoes, a pinch of sugar between finger and thumb, a streak of fish sauce that caught the light for a heartbeat, 2 tiny black field crabs, split neatly with a blade that had seen years. The pestle rose and fell, with the patience of someone who understood appetite better than talk. Ning let the rhythm enter her bones. She watched the tomatoes surrender, watched the papaya soften, watched the sauce grow dark and glossy. The clack and sigh of the pestle took her somewhere older, to a courtyard in Khon Kaen, where her mother had once made a rough village version with unripe mango and a spoon of borrowed sugar. A cheap plastic bowl, a wooden pestle that had belonged to someone else first. Her mother's laugh when the chili made them cough, the way they ate standing up because there was not much to sit on. The way the heat made sense. It was 2010. The city was still nursing the bruises of the Bangkok riots. Tourists had thinned. Prices had not. The baht had strengthened in a way that small people felt first. Ning knew this as a list rather than a theory. The rent due, the baby's milk, her mother's medicine, the price of rice, the way a smile needed both courage and calories. She was not a worrier by nature. Her friends called it her Ning. She could carry a joke in one hand and a problem in the other. She could look at something grey and find a colour to start with. She told herself the same truth she always did. Eat first, think after. Be kind to yourself for 1 mouthful, then face the rest. The helper slid a plastic stool in her direction. It rocked once and settled. She sat with her back to the road and her eyes on the mortar. The air clung to her skin. A gecko chirped on a lamppost, sounded surprised at its own voice, and fell silent. When the bowl came, it was heavy with scent. The first forkful stung her lips. The second cleared her thoughts. The third put her feet back under her. She ate fast for a minute, then slower, letting the sauce run and pooling it with the fork so that none went to waste. The old woman glanced up once, gauged the pleasure in Ning's eyes, and allowed herself the smallest of smiles. A taxi driver at the next table slurped his noodles and watched the traffic for fares that would never come at that hour. Two girls from a karaoke bar leaned towards each other and shared whispered news that made them cover their mouths in delight. A street cleaner finished his soup, wiped the bowl with a crust of bread, and nodded to the vendor, as if concluding a quiet pact between workers. Life happened at 4 a.m. It did not ask permission. Ning's phone buzzed once in her bag. A habit of checking told her it was nothing urgent. She left it where it was. She preferred, in that small portion of time the night had given back, to breathe. The next forkful paused halfway. If she thought too far forward, the food would turn to paper. She put the thoughts in order. She gave each a line and a full stop. The rent was late. She would talk to the landlady with the soft scarf who liked favorable stories. The baby would need new milk by afternoon. There was a pharmacy that allowed her to pay in 2 parts if she asked. Her mother would claim she was not hungry. Her mother would eat when the baby slept. Ning would make sure of it. She would go to work on time, brighter than she felt. She would choose a dress that made conversation easy and made dignity easier. She would keep her humor. It was the one thing she could carry that no one could take. She would bring back money. Finishing the last strands of papaya, she folded the bowl to her lips and drank the sauce. It punched and soothed at once. The old woman handed her a little side dish of cabbage and beans, the sort of grace that feels like friendship. Ning thanked her and pressed her palms together for a beat. The old woman returned the gesture with a nod that said, "Both you are welcome, and I know." The night carried a new sound, not louder than the rest, but wrong in shape. It arrived as metal calling to metal, a dull, deep thud with edges. Ning put the bowl down and stood before she knew she had stood. The line of headlights wavered. The black sedan came in sideways. It kissed the flank of a parked car with a violence that left paint in the air. It struck a moving BART bus with a force that tipped the bus onto its side. The bus skidded. The sedan scraped. A parked vehicle buckled as if bending to a bad joke. Then stillness, the kind that is only the breath you take before the next sound. Then voices from everywhere at once. Ning was already moving. Everyone was. The helper leapt the gutter. The taxi driver ran at a diagonal. One of the karaoke girls screamed a long, pinned note and put her hands to her face. The street cleaner was first to the bus. Ning reached the front of the cart and then the curb, her sandals slipping a little on sauce she had spilt and now forgotten. Shards of window glittered on the road like frost where frost never comes. The BART bus lay on its side. 2 people had been thrown partly out and lay half in and half on the frame. 3 more had been flung clear and lay in positions that made the heart want to edit reality. Someone shouted for an ambulance. Someone else shouted that there was no signal. A third person, with the blessed tone of someone who is used to small chaos, told everyone to breathe. Ning turned towards the sedan. There was a number plate she knew. The shape of the car had the smugness of wealth. The color admitted no dirt. She had walked past that car on better nights and worse. She had seen it outside places where curtains were thick and music was expensive. She had seen it pause and idle while boys ran to open doors before hands reached for handles. She knew it. The recognition struck like cold water. She did not shout. Her mouth formed words that did not leave. In their room, her mother would be lying on her side, trying to settle the baby with a slow stroke between shoulder blades. Her daughter would be turned towards the wall, the way children are when they want to listen to adult things they pretend not to hear. That picture steadied Ning more than anything else could have done. She took a breath through her nose. The taste of lime and smoke made her eyes water. She moved towards the bus. A young man in a football shirt had his shoulder under the rear frame. 2 others took the front. The street cleaner found a length of timber from somewhere and used it as a lever. The helper boy crawled through the rear gap and began to talk to the passengers inside with a tone that made fear sit down. Ning crouched beside the woman half out of the door. She saw that speaking would help more than panic. She said what she would want to hear. "You are not alone. Help is here. Breathe slowly. Tell me where it hurts." The woman nodded, even though her eyes were elsewhere. Sirens arrived at last with their earnest certainty. Hands professionalized the scene. Tape drew soft borders. Questions found their way to the right mouths. The smell of petrol ran a little in the gutter and then stopped. Someone had done the necessary with a hand that knew how. The air changed from shouting to instructions. In the change, people found themselves again and began to feel what they were feeling. Ning stepped back, noticed for the first time that her hands were shaking, and realized that she was still holding the plastic fork. She put it in the bin lid, wiped her palms on her skirt, and made herself look ordinary. The helper boy came to stand beside her. He had dust on his cheek in the shape of a thumb. "You all right, Pi?" he asked. "I am all right," she said, and for most values of all right, it was true. They walked back to the stall because walking somewhere is better than standing nowhere. The old woman was already tidying what did not need tidying. A fresh breeze wandered up the street, carrying a cooler patch of air from the water. It lifted a napkin and then thought better of it. Traffic, cautious and thin, began to find new paths around the scene. Two tourists whispered to each other as if sound could do harm. Ning sat because the stool was still there with her shape in it. She reached for her purse and found the notes folded the way she liked them. One neat corner, Queen's face upright. She paid for the food she had already eaten and for another bowl to take away. The old woman wrapped it so well that the sauce would not leak even if the road tried to shake it free. A bundle of sticky rice went on top. A spoon. A small bag of sliced cucumber that would make the morning kinder. In the space between handing over money and taking the bag, Ning thought about how people are held together by strings that are not visible. Threads of duty, threads of habit, threads of grace. You can cut one and the rest will tug and somehow keep you upright. You can let a neighbor tie one back in place when your fingers are not steady. It is not a science. It works. She stood and bowed her head to the vendor. There was no speech long enough to fit what needed to be said, so a nod did the work. The helper boy gave a little salute with two fingers that turned into a shy wave. Ning smiled without effort for the first time that night. Her bike started at the second attempt. The engine purred like a cat that would not be tamed. She eased into the thin lane between cars and tape and people, keeping her speed at the pace of thought. The city opened a small corridor for her. She took it. Second road fell away behind her. The lights thinned. The air lost some of its noise and gained some of its sky. She rode past a shuttered shop where a boy slept inside the rolling grill with his head on a delivery bag. Past a shrine with marigolds that looked new in the glow of a cheap blue bulb. Past a dog that lifted its head, decided she was not news, and slept again. At a red light, she stopped even though nobody else did. The habit felt like a small luxury. She balanced the takeaway bag in her lap, checked the knot for safety, and listened to the quiet thrum of the engine. She told herself out loud very softly that today had ended, that tomorrow had not yet begun, that between the two there was a thin bridge where a person could stand and guess at better. When the light changed, she turned left and whispered, just to hear her own voice, that tomorrow might still be kind. You've been listening to Farang Stories. If you'd like more tales from Pattaya, Bangkok, and beyond, subscribe and share this episode.